This panel is titled Commodities to follow with our general rubric of the major titles, but then we decided to also bring in, with our speakers, any discussion also of credit and commodity and crop insurance. So it's a broad array of topics on those three titles. My name is Garrett Grady Lovelace, and I'm a professor at School of International Service. And this title, Commodities as such, was clearly the foundation of the Farm Bill back in the 1930s along with conservation. The original attempt to control supply so as to prevent price fallout. Since the height of the Depression, and thinking about ways to keep a price floor and what commodity programs and farm programs were needed so that farming could remain a livelihood. So for the majority of the 20th century, you had a whole array of farm programs and commodity programs which had problems and flaws, but on some level were all striving to have a degree of viability and a livelihood potential for farmers and growers. In the late 20th century, those changed pretty radically, particularly with the 1996 Farm Bill. And now a generation later, we brought together three experts and practitioners, Jim Gibbon being a practitioner, thinking through what the commodity title could be in the future. Its context, its historical context, and its central import in Farm Bill policy, and the crossroads that it's at right now, particularly with crop insurance on the horizon and the ascendancy, and thinking through both pragmatically what could happen under the current administration and the Farm Bill, but also I've liberated them to think more expansively toward the end of their comments in terms of what these programs could be, and also what research is needed on the part of scholars and students to help inform these titles, and particularly the commodity title, the first title. So we dive in. First off is Dr. Harwood Schaefer. He's the director of the Agricultural Policy Analysis Center, based in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is an independent analytical organization devoted to providing information that meets the needs of farmers and consumers, and I would also say scholars who draw upon it a lot, and policymakers in civil society. He has published hundreds of papers, many of them with Dr. Darrell Ray, the two founded Policy Pennings newsletter, which has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And please join us, those who came in. There's some empty chairs up front. These have covered everything from hog production, analysis of Farm Bill negotiations, the study of the economic impact of the elimination of the Conservation Reserve Program, and the study of various Commodity Reserve Program designs. Before starting APAC, he served as an ordained minister and rural parish pastor in agricultural communities for 30 years and saw firsthand the plight of the farm crisis in the 1980s on farming in rural communities. He's also served as research assistant professor in the Department of Resource and Agricultural Economics from 2010 until his retirement last year, and is currently working on policy research that explores commodity farm programs, price support, supply management, also in the West African and international context. So thank you, Dr. Schaefer.
Thank you. It's a Mike. Okay. It's a delight to be here. I want to tell you that when I speak to farm groups, my usual presentation time runs an animated hour. I was told I get 10 minutes, so what you get is the Cliff Notes version of what I usually present in more detail. It seems to me, and I've got a number of points that I want to make, and I'll make the numbers so you know when I change. One, I think we need to break through the silos that segment the issues both among the various commodity titles and among the various issues that we face in the food and agriculture arena. We segment issues so that we've got the title, commodity title, and that's versus the environmental issues versus climate change, hunger versus dietary change, sociology perspective versus an economist perspective. We talk about the food movement, and on we go. And each of us often works in our own little warren, and we're oblivious to what others do. And if we're really going to do what we need to do, we need to have a more holistic perspective, and we need to be able to talk the language that goes well beyond our own disciplinary areas to do things. Number two, as an overall perspective that Daryl and I have as we write. We believe that good U.S. agricultural policy is not about putting farmers around the world, other farmers around the world, out of business. That if our policies have negative consequences for farmers someplace else, that we have to deal with that. We do not want to do that kind of thing. That means we don't want to dump U.S. commodities on the world at below the cost of production prices. We think that's unconscionable and wrong. Number 3, food, like health care, is a necessity. They are both what Adam Smith called necessaries. Food is a market good, but I argued in my dissertation that it is not a free market good. A free market good is a good like a CD, and I can buy it or not buy it. I can walk away from not buying it and have no consequences. In the healthcare market, I walk away from the healthcare system and pretty soon I end up in the emergency room. With food, I cannot walk away from the market. I can wait for 10 years for gold to get down to the price that I want it to be. I can't do that with food. I've got to take and buy food no matter what the price is, whether it's high or low. So it puts a different constraint on me than a free market good. You know, gold's a free market good except when I want to get married and I got to buy one piece of gold. Other than that, I can stay out of the gold market with no consequences. 4, in agricultural policy, I believe that we have 2 choices. We can either treat the symptoms of long periods of low prices that farmers face, or we can treat the causes of those price and income problems. For the last 20 years, I believe agriculture has made a wrong turn, and we have designed programs that take a symptomatic approach. That is, we deal with the symptoms of low prices and not low prices themselves. And I want to say that when you do that, it's damn expensive. It's very expensive. 98, 99, 2000, 2001, we were shoveling out $20 billion a year, folks. At APAC, many consider us to be Neanderthals because we've taken a causal approach. We believe that we need to deal with the cause of price and income problems. We need to deal with the fact that there's a low price elasticity of supply and there's a low price elasticity of demand. And when you go into your econ class, you learn about supply and demand and you deal with curves that look like this. Now they're not curves at all, they're straight lines. Okay? Why economists call them curves, I have no clue. But the reality is that those two are like this. That a very small change in supply can shoot the hell out of the price of corn and commodities and drive it down into the basement. I mean, we're down in the basement and we have in excess 200 million bushels out of 15 billion. Okay, folks, that's a low price elasticity on that. Daryl once made a presentation before a congressional committee. He was preceded by a prominent agricultural economist whose name I will not give, but a well-known agricultural economist from a major university who had presented some information before him, and what Daryl presented was our issue of supply and the problems that farmers faced, and the low price elasticity of supply and the low price elasticity of demand. Just to translate that for non-economists, it means that no matter how cheap the food gets, we don't go from 3 meals a day to 5 meals a day. And no matter how high the prices get, we try not to go to 2 meals a day. I mean, the only time we go to 2 meals a day is when some of us are eating too much and we got a little bit of spare tire to remove. But we don't do that otherwise. Likewise, whether prices are high or low, farmers produce on every damn acre they have. I mean, they produce on every acre. You don't rent ground and then say to the landlord, oh, I'm not going to grow anything on 20% of the acres. A, you can't afford to do it because you paid rent on those acres, and B, the landlord doesn't want weeds growing on those acres, and they're pretty fussy about that kind of thing. They want that land taken care of. So anyway, Darrell made that kind of presentation, and then he came and sat down, and the other economists who'd argued the other side turned over to him and said, I agree with your analysis of the problem. I just don't like the implications that it has for the solution. Well, I'm sorry, folks. This is about science. If these are the problems, then these are the kind of solutions that deal with those problems, and you've got to get over it. Okay? I don't care whether you don't like the solutions. If you understand there's a low price elasticity of supply and a low price elasticity of demand, then there are simply some things you ought to do. So that gets me to number 5. And number 5 is that we're in favor of supply management program. Now, people said that went out with the 96 Farm Bill, and it did. But I want to tell you that we've been dealing, if you look at human history, we've been dealing with supply management programs for over 3,500 years. We had supply management program in the MB2A. That's called Moses. Okay? The Chinese have had supply management programs for 2,000 years. They've had their ups and they've had their downs, but they've had some form of it over the time, and they've had the same arguments that we have. And so we think that we ought not pay on every bushel, pound, bale, hundredweight that's produced. And right now, with crop insurance, with revenue insurance, that's what we're doing, folks. We're paying on every bushel, bale, pound that's produced. That's what happens with ARC and PLC. Now, we reduce that by 20% or whatever we do, but basically the effect is that whatever we pay gets spread over every bushel that's produced. Farmers don't say, well, this money only goes to these bushels and it doesn't go to these bushels. It goes to into their bank account. We're talking about the 21% cut at the USDA. The only kind of program that's going to come in financially with the 21% cut is the supply management program, because with the supply management program, we take crops in at 95% of the full cost of production into the USDA, okay, and I'm at time, and we sell it out at 175%, so it becomes a self-pay program, or at least it covers a batch of the costs. As Merrigan's talked this morning in number 6, or number 5A, consumer sovereignty, we believe that we need to listen to consumers. And if they want GMO free, then that's what the hell we ought to produce. Okay, if they want us to take a shot and put a shot in a bull calf before we castrate it, then I don't care if you've not done that for 100 years. If that's what the consumers want, then that's what we ought to be doing. We just need to charge for it. So we need, consumer sovereignty is pretty high. Well, the last thing is that we're going to have grassroots organization. We're going to have every foodie, every farmer, every producer, every milk producer, everybody up and down the road for a farm bill where we all stick together and we all deal with something comprehensively. Because if we don't do that, folks, then we're going to have more of the same, and it's just going to get expensiver and expensiver. Thank you.
And we'll take questions at the end. There's a lot of provocative statements and a lot of questions. And quickly, the ARC is the Ag Risk Coverage and the Price Loss Coverage and the new crop insurance of the 2014 Farm Bill. Next up, we have Carl Zuloff, professor in the Department of Ag, Environment, and Development Economics at The Ohio State University. Dr. Zuloff's areas of specialization are commercial ag policy and commodity futures and options markets. In 2008, Zuloff made a significant contribution to farm policy debate by offering policymakers a conceptual framework that became the basis for average crop revenue election programs, which is crafted in legislation and part of the 2008 Farm Bill, led by Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Durbin of Illinois. Most recently, his leadership and hundreds of papers in Farm Doc Daily, which got a nice shout out by Kathleen Merrigan this morning, is appreciated and read across the country, across sectors, and I encourage you to tap into that realm of expertise. And now, Dr. Zuloff.
Thank you very much, Garrett. I'm delighted to be here and to have this opportunity to discuss with you foreign policy. I want to talk about three separate topics with you, and following along what Garrett asked me to do, which is to talk about research topics. I'm going to break them into what I would call strategic views for research and more tactical views for research. So the first item that I would like to talk about is the evolutionary reform of foreign policy, because this bill's been around since 1933. The reason it has continued, the reason it remains an issue of contemporariness is because the bill has changed over time. If you look at recent farm bills, the trends that I would call to your attention, and by the way, I think these trends will show up in most farm bills. They don't necessarily show up in every farm bill. If you draw a line, you will see that. First of all, we've been moving away from income payments to farmers to payments based on risk assistance. It's a philosophical change, it's a programmatic change, etc. Concurrent with that, we've been moving away from price-based programs to revenue-based programs, personified by two separate types of programs, one being crop insurance, which almost exclusively is revenue insurance now, is purchased by farmers, even though they have the option for yield insurance. And the second being, as Kathleen mentioned, the revenue programs that began in the 2008 Farm Bill have continued in the 2014 Farm Bill as the ARC, or ARC program. We have been expanding the scope of this Farm Bill since at least 1996, bringing different commodities into the bill, crops as well as livestock. We now have a very extensive disaster assistance program for livestock, so we've been expanding the scope of this bill within even the traditional agricultural realm. Payment limits have become an issue since 1970. They've been continuously debated. It's a very controversial issue. We go up and down. It's not a linear line, but there has been a steady growth in the role of payment limits in the Farm Bill. If we go outside the farm safety net, which in my definition is the Title I commodity programs and Title 11, which is the crop insurance programs, I see the Farm Bill as a collection of safety nets. In the nutrition safety net, and I think you have to keep that in mind, and you have to think beyond just the commodity titles, even though that's what my expertise is. In the food safety net, what we've been moving away from is to nutrition-based programs. We've also created, I think, a conservation safety net ever since the 1985 Farm Bill. And we've had a big expansion in both the programs themselves and the composition of those programs and their objectives. So that's been two other long-running Farm Bill trends. I'd now like to turn to more of a tactical precision on research for the current Farm Bill, what I oftentimes refer to as drivers of this Farm Bill. And a lot of what I'm going to say is going to mirror what Kathleen said in her opening remarks. I was pleasantly surprised at the amount of overlap. We do have some differences, however. First of all, I think this Farm Bill is being colored very, very much by this, what I would call anxiety over the potential for a farm financial crisis. The farm income, as Kathleen noted, has dropped dramatically over the last couple of years. Farmers are under more financial stress than they have, but the picture is actually quite mixed if you look at the objective data. Debt to asset ratios remain very favorable by historical standards. We have made very large payments by programs that have helped mitigate that stress, but certainly the potential exists for that financial stress to occur. Whether it happens or not remains to be seen, but it's there and it's very much coloring this debate. Okay? The other factor that's coloring the debate that's related to this is we don't know. If you look historically, the Farm Bill is driven as much by anything: what was the price, what was the size, what was the revenue from the crop that preceded the writing of the Farm Bill. It looks like we're going to write this Farm Bill late this year, early next year, and so we don't know yet the size of the 2017 crop. We don't know what its price is. Until we know that, we won't understand the perspective that people are going to bring to this. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I kind of am bemused by some of the discussion because I think it's pursuing something that we don't know. And if you do know how to predict prices, you ought to go trade. Okay? And so I think we have a lot of uncertainty, but this is going to color this Farm Bill quite extensively. But again, this kind of feeds into this uncertainty, this apprehension about we could be on the throes of a very significant financial stress. Reinforcing this is there is a great deal of anxiety about the Trump administration's position on trade. Agriculture is one of the most trade-dependent sectors in the U.S. economy. I've never seen an aggregate number, but it's probably 20 to 30%. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but that's about the size that I would estimate it. The renegotiation of NAFTA, which has been a huge market development for U.S. agriculture, just really, it adds to this sense of anxiety that exists out there about where we may be going. Okay? Other drivers. I contend that there are three political parties in this country right now. There's the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the party of Trump. And how those parties come together and govern, if they even come together and govern, is yet to be determined. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the process, how the coalitions are going to form, and this will have a big influence. Process matters an awful lot, and process is as much about perception as the way that you do it. And so that's an uncertainty right now, but it will be a big driver, and it will probably manifest itself in the budget. If the Republican agenda is currently thought to be, if we do get tax reform, if we do get tax reductions, if we do get increased defense spending, if we do get a huge infrastructure bill, we're going to have to take money from somebody, okay? And it's going to be basically much of the rest of the programs. And so how this agenda plays itself will become a very big driver in how we discuss, think of, and perceive this Farm Bill. Moving on to the last section, and this is opportunities that I think in this particular Farm Bill. I think this Farm Bill is going to largely be a conventional Farm Bill because of the anxiety over the potential for foreign financial stress. Okay? I could easily be wrong on this. Okay? And so I think you're going to see more traditional programs tend to dominate. You're going to see a lot of interest in conservation programs. Because conservation programs allows you to create a withdrawal of land for conservation reasons that also has a financial implication. You reduce supply, increase price. You don't solve, but you soften the amount of financial stress that exists. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussion of conservation programs. Increasing cap on CRP, I think, will be, for example, a very specific program that will be on the table. Two programs that I'm not going to discuss, but I want to call attention to you. There is widespread agreement that dairy policy needs to be rethought in this country. There is a widespread agreement that cotton needs to be discussed. These are really minute, not minute, they're big programs, but you have to understand a lot of very specifics in that. So I won't spend my time, because I only have 10 minutes to go into that. We can talk about that if you wish to do so. I would, however, like to call your attention to dairy, which many of you may not have thought about. If you look at the dairy industry, there is a huge difference in the the market served, the financial situation, the cost of production, in particular by small and large producers. It has probably the biggest variation that I'm aware of by size. I think there's a big discussion coming in this country, whether it happens in this farm bill or not, what do we do about small versus large farms? They are different entities, and dairy is the personification of difference. So I think there's great opportunity to do creative thinking about small versus large in a policy context with dairy. You do have to learn an awful lot of specific lingo if you're going to go into the dairy sector of the policy also. Moving on to, those are sort of my top tier. Moving on, if we do see trade begin to decline, I think you're going to see a lot of interest in trade promotion programs as a way to counter the decline in trade that's occurring. Crop insurance will be there because for no other reason than crop insurance is the largest single expenditure item outside of nutrition programs. Okay? And so when big expenditure items just draw a lot of attention. Okay? I do think, if I could cite a little bit, I do think there will be a continuing interest in commodity programs, and we're not going to go to crop insurance entirely, even if you take a 10-year, 20-year perspective, because they deal with different risks. Crop insurance is a crop production risk. Commodity programs deal with multiple years of losses. Commodity programs have so far been more important in the last 3 years than have crop insurance in dealing with the financial stress that farmers have. And that's exactly what you would expect. The design of the program fits that. And then finally, and Kathleen mentioned this, I think payment limits will become a big issue also. I should mention that. And I think we're going to talk about per acre payment caps, which the ARC program has and the PLC program does not have. And I just wrote a Farm Docs article if you're interested in this. It's had a major impact on payments by the ARC program. And the question will be, what is the right limit and should it extend to PLC? Finally, I agree with Kathleen. I think nutrition, I put it up here, I debated whether to put it up here. I think we're resolving this. I think we're deciding as a group that we don't want to remove nutrition from the Farm Bill. And I think the budget is also solving the nutrition issue because as the economy has expanded, people have moved off the SNAP program, and that's solving the budget exposure issue for those who have that as an issue. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't say there will be something that comes completely out of left field. Okay? There always is. There is at least one issue and multiple issues. And so when you're at this stage in the Farm Bill process, I think you really want to be flexible. It is these new issues that give people who particularly don't have a title in the Farm Bill an avenue into the Farm Bill. And so being flexible and realizing that this issue is now coming here and nobody saw it coming is a great way to gain entry into the process. I thank you and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. So now we move on to Jim Goodman, the farmer on the panel. We're so lucky and honored to have you, Jim, join us. Jim and his wife, Rebecca, run a 45-cow organic dairy farm in southwest Wisconsin. His farming roots trace back to his great-grandparents' immigration from Ireland during the famine and the farm's original purchase in the mid-19th century. Jim credits more than 150 years of failed farm and social policy as his motivation to enter into the fray of advocacy in a farmer-controlled, consumer-oriented food system. He serves on the policy advisory boards for the Center for Food Safety, Organic Consumers Association, the National Family Farm Coalition, and the Midwest Environmental Advocates of the Family Farm Defenders. He was the chair of the USDA North Central Regional Sustainable Ag Research and Education Administrative Council, and is a current member of the USDA National Research Extension Education Economics Advisory Board. He was a Kellogg Foundation Food Society Policy Fellow with Ricardo and has written for Huffington Post and a few other outlets. We're very pleased to have Jim join us.
Thank you. It's quite a pleasure to be here. And in her opening statement, she said we had a panel of experts and practitioners. And I will not claim the expert title, but happy to be called a practitioner. And I think as we move down the line here, you're going to see there the presentations go from well-organized experts into the chaos theory, which is where I fall in.
And can everyone hear Jim? Just want to make sure.
I don't know if I can get much
No.
closer. Is this microphone even on?
It goes to the
Okay, well, I'll try and talk louder because I'm kind of a soft talker, and I hope I don't have to finish up like Amy Goodman usually does on Democracy Now! And talk so fast no one can get it. And I am an organic farmer, and so I'm kind of out of this system. And I'm not really part of the conventional system. The Farm Bill doesn't probably have as much impact on me maybe as it does on most farmers. Back in the early 90s, kind of going back to the old 60s adage of tune in, turn on, drop out. That's kind of what we did to the conventional ag system, because organic is a completely different animal. We knew at some point it would change, and we would parallel the conventional system of large companies controlling, deciding what kind of price we got, and we didn't think it would happen quite as fast as it did, but it has. There's a lot of things I don't have to talk about because they've already been discussed. There's a lot of things I could talk about, and maybe they'll come up in the questions. But last week I was watching the confirmation hearings of Sonny Perdue and a couple of the other committee hearings on the Farm Bill. And the thing I noticed was that a lot of the people on these congressional committees don't really know a lot about agriculture. I mean, they're from states that maybe don't have a strong agricultural output. And so when they have these hearings, they call in experts to tell them the way things ought to be. And unfortunately, these experts are usually the National Milk Producers Federation, International Dairy Foods Association, various people from Wall Street or wherever. So it's not surprising that we get farm policy that supports the big economic interests rather than farmers, people who need to eat food, people who have nutritional problems, low-income people, beginning farmers, whatever. And another thing that struck me was that the USDA has the guidelines for nutritional adequacy. I don't know if it's a pyramid anymore or whatever it is. My plate, is that what they call it?
Yes, my plate.
Okay. Well, I didn't hear the commodity crop system of corn, soy, CAFO production. I mean, that's not getting us there. That's not a system of agricultural production that gets us to a quality diet. So on one hand, USDA is promoting the type of agriculture they're promoting and saying you should do this, but we're really not doing a lot to help you get there. So I'm kind of confused about that. And Garrett mentioned in our opening that in the 96 Farm Bill, things really kind of changed. And you also have to remember that in 1994, that's when NAFTA was signed. So I think there's some parallels there between the point at which the global agricultural trade really kind of kicked into effect and our farm policy kind of changed for the worse. Because, like it or not, I think that farm bills now support global trade more than they support local production, adequate nutrition, healthy soil practices, healthy animal practices. It's kind of, in my opinion, become a tool for multinational corporations to get very rich, and they're doing just that. I don't need to talk about crop insurance because I think that's been discussed, and crop insurance doesn't really work that well for organic farmers. It's not been that many years ago that organic farming wasn't even recognized as what's the word they use, a farming practice that made sense. If you went in to get a loan or whatever, you needed to have your plan of pesticide application, and we didn't have that. It's just like if a woman farmer goes in to get a loan and they say, can your husband come in? This just is not right, but that's kind of the way we were treated. So what do I think the Farm Bill should do? Well, I think we need to get back to its original intent back in the 30s and I want to read exactly some of the language out of that. Keep food prices fair for farmers, consumers, ensure an adequate food supply, and protect the country's natural resources. Well, in the time that first came into effect in the 30s, we had the Dust Bowl, we had people in bread lines, kind of a no-brainer, but maybe we're not in quite that situation now, maybe we're in a worse situation, but I think we need to get the Farm Bill back to that. The original intent to keep fair farm prices. If we want to keep farmers in the land, if we want to keep more small farmers in the land, we have to have fair prices. We need to support that with going back to parity pricing, which when that went out in the 80s, that's when things really kind of went to hell for farmers. I think we need to have accessible credit. I think it has to be there for young farmers, women farmers, minority farmers. because like it or not, there's been discrimination. There's been lawsuits against the black farmers in the South suing because they were denied access to USDA programs. Conservation programs, I think with the corn soy monoculture, we've seen a lot of acres plowed up that never should have been plowed up. We've seen hillsides that were formerly in permanent sod or pasture that have been plowed up or done with no-till, doesn't make a lot of difference in my book, and planted the soybeans because there was money. I think we need to go get back away from that, take some of those acres back out of production. Maybe we need to expand the CRP programs, which protect land that shouldn't have been plowed, that protect wetlands that shouldn't have been drained. The biggest problem for farmers is low prices, and the reason the prices are low is because there's too much stuff produced, so maybe we need to back off from production. Now, on the other side of the coin, as I mentioned, multinational corporations have done great because they can buy all this grain cheaply and sell it all over the world, convert it into processed food items that, again, don't fit into that healthy diet structure. Some of the other things that I might have in kind of a wish list for the Farm Bill, if I ever came for a day or something, is like ending commodity checkoffs. We've been paying into checkoffs and seen little benefit for the farmers. They always sell it as well, where you're going to get money for research and money for promotion. Well, I think that the companies that are selling their processed food items should pay for their own promotion, because you know there's this old theory that if you feed a horse enough oats, eventually the birds will get something to eat. It's true, but the profits in this industry have never trickled down to the farmers, and the ones that have are, you know, as that oats trickling through the horse is kind of objectionable. They say that we need the research money. That's true. We have publicly funded land-grant colleges, and that was supposed to be their mission. Do farmer-driven research. Let's keep that going. Let's make sure that the things that they develop are not given to corporations to make a profit off of. Let's ask farmers what kind of things they need. There's currently a big push for an organic checkoff, which I feel the same way about as I do the conventional checkoffs. It's really not going to help us. They're estimating, I think $30 million will come in from farmers and processors. Well, the processors will pass their costs on to the farmers, so we'll end up paying for it. And a lot of people are saying maybe 10% of that will go to research. It's not a lot of money. My idea has always been that USDA has figures. They know how much land is farmed organically, how much food is purchased organically. Let's take that percentage of the USDA research budget and put it into organic. And this is research that any farmer can use, cover crops, holistic animal health. It makes more sense than trying to make the farmers pay for their own research when it's supposed to be done publicly funded. I think we need a new title of the Farm Bill for native farming. I think we need to recognize that wild rice and harvest of wild foods is a legitimate farming practice. And I think native people should have the same access to the Farm Bill as everybody else. I think that if large farms are reliant on immigrant labor to do most of their work, and the dairy industry is really good at this, as are a lot of vegetable production, I think those workers need to get paid a minimum wage, or better yet, a living wage. These people basically feed us, and if immigrants weren't here, it wouldn't look very pretty. I think the Rural Utilities Service needs to have the ability to support rural broadband access and continue, and a lot of you don't know, but a lot of the rural co-ops, electric co-ops, are putting in solar wind generation, community-based projects. I think that needs to continue. I think that's an important thing. Actually, I think I'll stop there. I have some time left, but I think questions may be more important than whatever else I might have to say. So.
Great, thank you, Jim. That set of comments just showed how interwoven the Farm Bill is, and the commodities title can't really contain what it was set out to contain, even though it's important to focus in on it and get its original intent and figure out current incarnations of it. So at this point, we open up the floor to questions and answers. I see Gus, do you have a question?
Carl, really appreciated Gus Schumacher, your discussion, particularly your comment on moving from a calorie base to nutrition base and how that's evolving. Have you thought through how that, with food stamps, still, you can buy anything except going back to 1965, the Farm Bill, anything but tobacco and alcohol. There have been 17, 18 hearings in Congress on SNAP by Conaway. One of the most interesting one was incentives versus restrictions. And in Puerto Rico, they added 4% to all food stamps in Puerto Rico, which you can only use for fruit and vegetables at a farmer's market. That's had a huge impact on horticulture in Puerto Rico. With other discussions around Washington, again, your theme of calories and nutrition on food stamps. No, you have WIC and others, but on nutrition, there is on restrictions versus incentives. It's a tiny amount in the incentive side, but there's some talk of having something called a SNAP up, where if you decide not to use your food stamp card for sugary drinks, you can then buy extra fruit and vegetables at half the price. Any thoughts of how, with $70, $80 billion in the SNAP, what are your thoughts about your implementing in the Farm Bill a more nutrition-focused SNAP as opposed to what it is now?
Nutrition is not my area of expertise. I will begin by noting that I do follow the discussions in nutrition for just personal interests as well as simply you have to understand the Farm Bill. And I'm aware of the debate over incentives. I don't know the specifics of it, okay? What I do think I know, okay, is that names of titles really matter. And I always thought that one of the biggest things that came out of the 2008 Farm Bill was the renaming of the food stamp program to SNAP. Many of my colleagues in the nutrition area will say, well, nothing changed. And in some respects, they're correct. But Congress signaled strongly how it wanted this program to move. And that's why I pay a lot of attention to names on titles. Okay? And so I think there's this consensus, particularly among the supporters of SNAP, to move us towards nutrition. What we are in the process of trying to figure out is operationally how to do that and budgetarily how to do that, because it's not a cheap transformation. We can argue about the size of the cost, but not many people argue that it would be cheaper to do that. Okay, there are a few out there who do that. So I think this research that's evolving about the potential use of incentives, which as an economist I always find interesting, okay, that you would actually incentivize behavior in some way, is a really fruitful potential avenue. Now whether it pans out or not, you need to have a number of research. But I'm really intrigued by this. I'm intrigued by the research I've seen so far. I again think it's too early to get that excited about it because I'm a scientist, okay? I like to see confirming events. But it's there. You know, if we are indeed reducing the SNAP rolls because of the economy, which all the data suggests we are, you know, maybe some of the projected savings can be turned into a grant for incentives that they may capture some of the savings from the expected decline in nutrition. It's going to take money, I understand that, but I think this is a very fruitful avenue for, without endorsing it, because I don't think we know enough to endorse it, I think it is a fruitful avenue for research, for investigation, for experimentation, and part of policy is always experimentation. We try something, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Thank you. And the program Gus is talking about Wholesome Wave, the Double Bucks program, a very novel program that began in philanthropy and has now made its way into Farm Bill piloting. Thank you, Gus. Other questions? Yes, Tristan.
Yeah, hi. My name is Tristan.
And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, and I work for Action Aid USA. I was just interested to know more about, I'm really interested in the metaphor of comparing ag system to healthcare. And was just wondering, I guess what the politics would look like in trying to build this coalition around supply management. What are the groups that would be what are the constituencies that would be most open to this kind of argument, and I guess how do you build that political force?
I'm working with I'm making the circuit of farm organizations, mostly National Farmers Organization and National Farmers Union. They're the ones that are really in the supply management area and working to get local support, basically helping people understand what the process is and what farm income looks like and what the projections are, and look at the current costs and returns. And that's helpful to farmers because they've really not looked at the USDA spreadsheets. And I was in Texas with Texas farmers, and we were going over the spreadsheet, and I had the USDA costs and returns up there, and one of the farmers looked at that, was reading down what the costs were, and there was this line that said unpaid labor, and he raises his hand and he said, I got a question about that line, unpaid labor. He says, does that mean me? And I said, yes, that's you in that costs and returns. That unpaid opportunity cost, the opportunity cost for land, it's unpaid, that's for you. Now it's paid if you're renting the land, you're paying that, but we're talking about that. The other thing is that I was at Agricole 2011 where we had farmers from all over the continent of Africa, and we met in Dakar, and the farmers there all wanted the U.S. to put in a supply management program because we set the price for the world, and they wanted a higher price because they know that when 96 came along and we eliminated taking crop off the market and the price fell, that it killed them. It killed cotton farmers, and they figured that out, and I saw significant support, and that's how we can work together on those kind of issues. And overseas, I'm working with farmers in Senegal, and they're in rice production because the French colonials wanted to have rice production in Senegal so that they could export that to France at that point. So they wanted to encourage rice production, and basically it supplanted the traditional crop growing of sorghum and cowpeas and millet. And when you look at those, the nutritional output per hectare when you mix those crops is significantly greater than when you measure the number of bushels of corn or the number of hundredweight or a kilo of rice that you get. And so we're beginning to talk about total nutritional output per hectare, the balance of essential amino acids, micronutrients, and matching that up with the number of people that live on that farm and figuring out how they change their production to meet their own nutritional demand first. Then, when they've done that, they can look at what they want to market for the surplus. So we're beginning to have the same nutrition discussions, except for them, they don't have SNAP. They simply have got some hectares of land that they're growing on, trying to make a living from, where the people who use SNAP in the U.S. no longer have access to land. So we're having the same conversations in slightly different ways.
And I'd love to get Carl's thoughts on that question also, and particularly with the Conservation Reserve Program and the set-asides, which were a big part of the original Farm Bill. That was part of the original 1930s Conservation and Commodities Title Partnership. But then in the 90s, the set-aside programs were really in large scale decreased. And do you see that returning in some capacity?
For those of you not familiar with the conservation programs, the modern conservation programs date to the 1985 Farm Bill. There was kind of a pyramid established that has sort of remained in place over time. It's evolved somewhat. It's a little bit different legs on the pyramid right now. but initially the largest part of the pyramid and one that remained very significant is the Conservation Reserve Program. It started off as kind of a joint environmental supply management program to withdraw. This was, remember, 85 was the height of the farm financial crisis. Okay, so we took somewhere around 20 to 30 million acres out of production at that time. We now have it capped at 25 million, if I remember the numbers right. With the emergence of this anxiety about farm stress right now, I see a real discussion about, is that cap too low? Should it be 30 million? Should it be 35 million? I don't think it would go above 35 million. But if you pull that land out of production for environmental reasons, and I should mention, CRP has evolved very substantially to more of an environmental program and less of a supply management program. There's a set of criteria. If you want to get into the details, there's a lot of set of criteria that you have to meet if you want to bring land into it. They have to satisfy certain conservation needs. And so that's what I see potentially here, because you can, and you always look for ways you can fund things by changing other things, okay? That are, I don't believe there are very few win-wins, okay? I don't really subscribe to that. I'm an economist to begin with. We have trouble with that from the get-go. We see trade-offs, okay? But you can get closer to win-win situations. And so if I pull this land out of production, I reduce the cost of ARC, I reduce the cost of PLC. And that money can be then transformed into a conservation expenditure item, okay? Or if you want to look at it as, we're going to pull the land out through conservation, which is going to save us money on ARC and PLC, and that's how we can fund it. I think that's a very useful strategy in the Farm Bill, to look for these synergies where you can get savings in something, maybe within the title, maybe across the titles, that you can then use. And so I think this debate is set up. Whether it happens or not, you know, that's another issue. That depends on all those things that we talked about. But I think that the potential for this debate is clearly there. And that's why I mentioned that I think CRP conservation programs could be an opportunity for change.
Can I take a
Great.
shot? Garrett, can I take
Yes.
a quick shot at that? Well, I think you asked about how we could support price supply management. You're not going to get much help from the commodity groups, American corn growers, soybean growers, Farm Bureau, which is basically an insurance company, but they like lots of cheap crops. And I think it was Dr. Merrigan this morning mentioned the nutrition part of the Farm Bill. You know, that's a really strategic political alliance that we have urban legislators that are going to join farm legislators to support this Farm Bill, and I think a lot of people would like to see that broken, because then we just have a standalone Farm Bill and a standalone nutrition thing. I guess my thinking is that I want people to have affordable, good food. Low-income people can't afford to buy it, so we need to look at the social aspects of raising the minimum wage and making sure everyone can afford food, because then that supports farmers getting a fair price. And the whole system, you know, you have to look at the whole thing together. And as far as supply management, you know, Canada has had supply management for their dairy for years. Now, I'm not a big supporter of that quota system because it has a lot of problems. But at times when, there were times when Canadian dairy farmers were making at least twice or more the amount on their milk that U.S. farmers were getting paid, but still the price in grocery stores of a gallon of milk was less in Canada than it was here. So that shows that there's something really wrong with our system, that the farmers are paid so low and the consumers are paying so much more than Canadians were. That money is leaking out of the system someplace, and I think, and I don't know how to do it, but I really think that needs to change.
Let me break in and give a quick argument for why nutrition, a theoretical argument for why nutrition and farm production belong together. And that is because they're both dealing with the low price elasticity of supply. For consumers, it's when the prices go up, they get killed. And so you've got that low price elasticity. When farmers, when the price goes down, you're getting. So they're both affected by that price elasticity issue. and it makes sense that they have a common alliance and are really dealing with a common thing. I mean, farmers don't produce except to feed people, and if they can't feed people, then the system is broken. So keeping them together for me makes a lot of sense from a theoretical base.
Great, and I think we'll take 2 questions and then respond. We'll do the front row. So we'll do Eleanor and then front row.
Thanks. Eleanor Sarmer. I had wanted to pick up on Jim's question about crop insurance not working well for organic producers, and maybe ask a question of you and of Carl. I was at USDA until January 20th. I didn't work on crop insurance. I was AMS administrator. But I heard from a lot of farmers, not just organic, but also folks who were smaller scale diversified farms, places where the production systems are really different, the pricing structures are different, the marketing channels are different, that crop insurance doesn't work for them and is not accessible. And I'm wondering about your opinions on opportunities to provide that important safety net to the diversity of ag in the United States, and whether, I mean, is whole farm revenue protection the vehicle and we just need to make it work better? Or are there opportunities either in the Farm Bill or on the agency side to extend that important program to a lot of these folks who currently aren't covered?
So crop insurance question, and then
Okay.
introduce yourself. Yeah, we'll take one more question and then we'll.
Sure. My name's Sakina. I'm a Emerson National Hunger Fellow with the Congressional Hunger Center, and I'm currently working with the National Conference of State Legislatures. And given that the Farm Bill is under federal policy and under USDA, I'm curious to know if there's a role that state legislatures can play in supporting farmers in the markets that they serve and helping them access the resources that they need to continue doing what they do.
Excellent, thank you.
Well, I'll take my shot at the crop insurance thing. Organic, I mean, it works better now than it used to. I mean, when we first converted to organic 20-some years ago, we paid higher premiums because we were assumed to be a high risk because we didn't farm right and we were going to have low yields, and so that was the way that went in. If we got paid for crop losses, we were paid at the conventional rate, even though prices of organic grain were higher. Now that's changed somewhat and it's better. I guess I've always looked at crop insurance not as a way to make money, which some farmers maybe do, and that they plant crops in places that they know they're not going to get a yield, but they can insure them and get a payment on them. I've always looked at it that you're always going to have some loss, be it to poor spring weather, you may get hail, you may get a drought, and you're probably not going to have a total loss. If you do, it's really good to have crop insurance. But generally it works out that in any 10-year period, the amount you pay in premiums is probably going to come back to you in some type of payment. So I don't want the insurance to be a money maker. I just want it to be a safety net, which it should be. And I'm not an expert on crop insurance. I pretty much do the livestock part of our farm, and our partner does the crop thing. And we just insure for that reason. You know, we don't insure at the highest level we can. We don't insure at the lowest level. We just want to be protected. We don't want to spend way more on premiums than we'll ever collect, but we don't want to collect more than we're entitled to. We just want insurance.
On the crop insurance question, there has been a great deal of innovation in crop insurance since probably 1996. You go back to 1980 to begin the discussion, but really revenue insurance was the first, in my opinion, major innovation since the 1930s in crop insurance. But we've seen an expansion. There is an organic one. I think it is working better. I'm not sure it's perfect. Okay. We're seeing people tinker with livestock revenue insurance of various forms. We have to first of all address, I think, a fundamental philosophical question about crop insurance. And that question is crop insurance an actuarially sound program or not? Right now, it is legally an actuarially sound program, okay? Many of the discussions that I hear about where you want crop insurance to go would bring into question the actuarial soundness assumption. I'm not saying it wouldn't, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I think an actuarialist would sit there and definitely scratch their head, okay? This is more about pursuing particular objectives of social desirability and not financial inflows and outflows to an insurance fund, okay? And so I think we have to have that discussion before we can move to many of the proposals that I hear about crop insurance. And that's a public decision. I don't think crop insurance has to be an actuarially sound program, but it does mean changing the nature of the program. So I think that's the first discussion that we have to have on crop insurance, okay? Beyond that, you have to understand just some numbers so that you can put crop insurance into your point of discussion. Okay, crop insurance will run about $7 to $8 billion a year in terms of total cost. Farmers pay about 40% of the insurance premium, and 60% of it is subsidized by the federal government. Okay, that is the largest single expenditure item in crop insurance. There is also expenditure for A&O for the companies, administrative and organizational management things, to the delivery of it, because we use private crop insurance to deliver it, okay? And then there's some profit sharing that goes on. So understanding the layout of the budget to crop insurance and understanding the rationale behind crop insurance is, I think, critical to trying to go forward with proposals to deal with it. But I do think there's this big question of, is crop insurance actuarially, is that the primary objective actuarially sound? Okay? In terms of state legislatures, I think there's always a role for state legislators because this is a United States. You know, we are a federalist government, okay? And states have the right to pursue their own policies, okay? The policy should, I think, reflect the nature of that state. We are a country of experimentation, okay? I think that's one of the beauties of this country. Local governments, state governments can experiment, and that experimentation can inform policy in other states, policy in the federal government. And so I'm as a policy person, I'm always in favor of experimentation, be that at the state level, be that at the federal level, okay? The problem with agriculture is you gotta have a lot of money, okay? And most state governments don't quite have that much money to deal with it. So you will run into a budget constraint. But in terms of experimentation, in terms of trying things, I think state governments have a very big role to play in that aspect of the federal government.
Great, we'll
Let
take,
me-
oh yes.
Let me start with the state legislature question and say that in low price periods in particular, state legislatures have been powerful. We have the low price period after the '96 Farm Bill. Farmers were talking in Iowa and Minnesota about changing hooch to a fuel supplement, an oxygenate, and farmers lobbied the state legislatures for 10% ethanol, either seasonally or year-round. In Minnesota, started out seasonally, and Iowa started out year-round. Eventually, that became the renewable fuel standard in the middle of the next decade. But the ethanol movement and the ethanol stuff was really pushed at state legislature level first, before it got anything at the federal level. We're potentially, if we look at the USDA 2026 projections, we're talking about a decade of prices that are below the cost of production. And that's going to reduce the balance sheet that farmers have, and the numbers may not be as good as they look right now. And so we're going to see some pressure back on state legislators, I think, in terms of doing things, maybe going to a 30% ethanol blend, some changes in that area. So I think state legislatures have a significant role to play, and if farmers who are part of those co-ops begin to lobby for that, we're going to see, and farmers who got to figure out what's going to happen to their corn, they're going to be doing that. Whether they ought to be doing that or not from a nutritional, environmental point of view is another issue, but I think that's going to happen. In terms of crop insurance, actuarially sound, here's where Daryl and I come out. Actuarially sound means that basically insurance is best when it protects against random risk. It doesn't work when it protects against systemic risk. That's why if somebody has a cafe and they're going broke and they try to burn it down, the arson investigator investigates and they don't get paid, because that becomes a systemic risk if you allow building fires to be your way of managing your risk in running a cafe. And I've lived in areas where I've seen the cafes go down or the restaurants go down. So yield, price is a systemic risk, or is a systemic risk. It affects every farmer everywhere, and you have long periods of low prices. So when you have them, you're going to get hit. It means that revenue insurance doesn't work quite as well now because we have low prices. Now, when this farm bill was passed, revenue insurance was argued as a counter-cyclical program. It's a pro-cyclical program because it deals on market price. Daryl and I said we would have corn below $4. Our colleagues said it would never happen. Corn is below $4. Our analysis was right. Yield is a random risk, and therefore we support yield insurance and supporting that, and we would then peg the price at the loan rate at 95% of the cost of production. So you have a price. It doesn't make farmers rich when you do it, but it allows them to put the crop back in and keep on farming, and that's what most farmers want. They want that protection, and if you use the loan rate, then you've got a protected rate for the issue. So that's where we stand on those issues. You'll notice there may be some difference of opinion on the panel of how
But
we
that's what
see
makes
them.
it a good panel. So on that note, we're going to thank our panelists.